We are going to look at chapter 8, which is on respiratory system, which is the last chapter for this semester for your SASI session. Okay, so basically for respiratory system, okay, these are the learning outcomes. Okay, so we are going to look at the various respiratory surfaces in animals. So for example, we have the lungs, okay, for mammals. We have the gills for fish. We have the tracheal system um, for the insects, okay, grasshopper, for example. Gills for aquatic animals, skin, okay, for amphibian also can. So skin, for amphibian they use skin and also lungs, okay, so they have pulmocutaneous circuit, okay. Kalau untuk mammals we have pulmonary circuit because we use only lungs, okay. So for respiratory surfaces, for lung, basically it involves the alveolus. Okay, so you know that the alveolus, the wall of the alveolus is really thin. It is one cell thick, and then it is surrounded by many blood capillaries. Okay, so the distance between the alveolus, okay, the wall of the alveolus, and also the blood capillaries is really short. Okay, so the short distance between the blood capillaries that brings, for example, oxygen rich blood. Okay, so the short distance between the blood capillaries and the alveolus causes the rate of gas exchange to occur really fast. Okay, so there are a few factors that aids to make sure that there is efficient mechanism to make sure that gas exchange occur really fast between the respiratory surface and the respiratory medium. Okay, so for respiratory medium we have two types. For example, we have the water and also the air. So source of to extract the oxygen, for example, okay, and to eliminate the carbon dioxide. Okay, so for that, we are going to explain in brief the various respiratory surfaces in animals. And then second, identify and describe the structures and function of human respiratory system. So this one, we are going to look at the lungs, okay, and also the alveolus, how respiration occurs involving the lungs, okay. And then number three, state the Fick's law of diffusion and also Dalton's law of partial pressure. So this one, we are going to look at a few two of these laws, okay, that involve in respiration. And then number four, explain the process of gas exchange and gas transport. Okay, so we are going to look at what are the factors that influence, okay, the rapid diffusion or the rapid exchange of gas, okay, that involve for respiration. And then number five, describe the oxygen dissociation curve of hemoglobin. Okay. Ni kita akan tengok ada satu graph, okay, graph to explain how oxygen is released, okay, from the hemoglobin at several places in your body, okay. And then number six, discuss the control of breathing by chemoreceptors, okay. And then lastly is to discuss the effects of smoking, okay. Okay, so first we are going to look at the various respiratory surfaces in animals. So for this one, it says here, gas exchange is apparent in the structure of respiratory surfaces where gas exchange occurs by diffusion. Okay, so gas exchange has to occur through the process of diffusion. Okay. Okay, diffusion. So gas exchange. So for example, you have the blood capillaries, as I mentioned earlier. So this is the blood capillary. In the blood capillary, you have red blood cells, and then inside the red blood cells, you have many hemoglobins that bound to oxygen. Okay, so the oxygen must be released, okay, from the blood capillaries into the interstitial fluid and into your body cells, okay, to be used for cellular respiration. So the process of gas exchange must occur by the process of diffusion. And then number two, cells that carry out gas exchange have a plasma membrane that must be in contact with aqueous solution. Okay, so aqueous solution, in this case, it is referring to the blood and also to the interstitial fluid. Gas tu dia tak boleh dalam keadaan oxygen alone kan, so the oxygen has to be dissolved, okay, in an aqueous solution. In this case, in the blood, and from the blood into the interstitial fluid before it enters into your body cells. Okay. And then for fast gas exchange, okay, so these are the factors that helps, okay, to make sure gas exchange occur efficiently and rapidly. First, okay, respiratory surfaces for exchange of gases between the cells and the respiratory medium. Respiratory medium, there are two sources, okay, which is air and also water. Okay, so air, you have plenty of oxygen, and from that, the organism will release or exhale carbon dioxide, so that the carbon dioxide is released into the air. Same goes to aquatic animals. Okay, so aquatic animals, the source of oxygen comes from the water. Okay. So respiratory medium ada dua je, okay, air or water. So air is for terrestrial animals, water is for aquatic animals, okay. So must be large and also moist, okay, large and also moist. So it says, I repeat, respiratory surfaces for exchange of gases between their cell and respiratory medium, okay, which is air or water, must be large and moist. Okay, large and moist. So same goes to the lung, that is surrounded by blood capillaries, and also it must be in moist condition, and it must have a large surface. Okay, large surface. So that's why you have so many. That's why you have the alveolar wall, kan, macam tu. So it is in the shape of like this, and then you have so many of the alveolus, and then it is surrounded by the blood capillaries. Okay, so this is to increase surface area. Same goes to fish gills. Okay, so they are moist, they have large surface, and it also applies to even the skin of the frogs. Okay, say they must be in the moist condition. So this is to aid in the exchange of gases. Okay, so the surface must be moist. Okay, and it must be large. Okay, large surface area. Second, the respiratory surface must be thin, as I've mentioned, kan. So the wall, the alveolar wall is one cell thick. Same goes to the blood capillaries surrounding the alveolus. It is also one cell thick. Okay, so because the surface is thin, so this allows the gas to easily diffuse, okay, from the medium into the respiratory surface, and the path for diffusion must be short. Okay, macam capillary, blood capillaries and the alveolus, they are in short distance. Same goes to kalau earthworm, they don't have lungs, but the surface, okay, it involves the skin lah kan. So the skin of the earthworm is moist, and underneath you have many blood capillaries. Okay, many blood capillaries near to the skin. Okay, so this is to make sure that the distance, okay, for the exchange of the gas occurs in a short distance, okay, between the blood capillaries and the skin and the atmosphere. Okay, atmosphere, where you have the air that is full of oxygen. Okay. Okay, so next. So these are the list of respiratory surfaces for different organisms. You have the outer skin. For example, you have the outer surface, kan? So the outer surface, the skin, the gills, the trachea, and also the lungs. So the lungs is for mammals. The tracheal system is for insects. Okay, the gills for aquatic organism. The skin for amphibians. Amphibians and also earthworm, for example. And then the outer surface, you have the one cell organism such as amoeba. Okay, so mesti kena ada respiratory surface juga sebab dia perlukan oksigen. Okay, the amoeba, the unicellular eukaryotes. Okay, the gas exchange must also occur so that this organism is also supplied with oxygen to undergo cellular respiration. Okay, so so as you can see, so these are the list of diagram. So kalau nampak kat sini, so this is the body, kan, the body surface, and then you have the respiratory surface lining the lungs. Okay, so you have the many alveolus inside the lungs. Okay, so this increase surface area. So ini mammals lah, kan, ada raccoon kat situ. And then you have for insects. Okay, so insects, they have tracheal system. Okay, tracheal system, trachea, where you have the spiracle, the opening, so that exchange of gas can occur. So oxygen can enter, carbon dioxide can exit. Okay, through exhalation. Okay, so kita akan tengok one by one. So this is you have several organism that uses several different respiratory surface. You have here unicellular organism. Okay, unicellular organism such as here you have the paramecium. Okay, paramecium ke amoeba ke one cell organism. So they use the cell surface. Okay, outer surface, cell surface lah, cell membrane. Okay, say the cell membrane. So they obviously do not have any complex organs. So they just use the cell membrane. Okay, to allow oxygen to diffuse in and carbon dioxide to diffuse out. Oxygen is really the substance that is required for cellular respiration. Okay, so the product of cellular respiration is carbon dioxide. So for amphibians, they depend on two organs, which is the skin and also the lungs. Okay, so they have pulmocutaneous circuit. Okay, where gas exchange occurs involving the skin and also the lungs. Okay, so you have oxygen and also carbon dioxide. Oxygen diffuse. As you can see, the epidermis of the skin. Underneath, you have blood capillaries. Okay, so this allows there is a short distance. Okay, short distance, so that oxygen can diffuse into the from the atmosphere through the epidermis of the skin and into the blood capillaries. Okay, so as you can see, kalau tengok dalam gambar raja, dalam gambar raja buku ke apa yang bercolour, so the blood vessels that are blue in color, so it is oxygen poor blood, kan? Sorry, the blood vessels that are blue in color, it carries oxygen rich blood. Okay, oxygen rich blood. Kalau yang red, oxygen poor blood. Okay, so this oxygen poor blood, it carries carbon dioxide, so carbon dioxide diffuses out of the blood capillaries into the atmosphere. Okay, so vice versa lah for oxygen from the atmosphere through the epidermis of the skin into the blood capillaries, where the blood capillaries will carry oxygen rich blood. Okay, so for echinoderms such as the starfish here, which is aquatic organism, so basically they depends on this structure. Okay, the epidermis and this structure papula. Okay, so basically this is for the echinoderms. Okay, and then you have the insects. Okay, which depends on tracheal system. So you have here the spiracle. Okay, spiracle tu macam opening at the body surface that allows oxygen to enter and carbon dioxide to be released, okay, from the tracheal system. So ini adalah tube lah. Dia macam kalau kita trachea lah, kan, tapi kalau insects, they have tracheal system. Okay, branches of tubes, air tubes. Okay, that branch into individual cell. Ini dia akan terminate into individual cell within the body of the grasshopper. And then you have the fish. Okay, so fish depends on the gills. Okay, so gills have many structure. We call it as gills lamella. Okay, kalau kita alveolus lah, kan, alveolus. So for fish, they have gills lamella. So within this gill lamella, they have many blood capillaries for the exchange of gas. So this one here, as you can see, blood will carry carbon dioxide. Okay, carbon dioxide will be released and oxygen will enter, okay, from the water into the blood that to be carried throughout the body. So this one, it carries oxygen rich blood. This one, it carries oxygen poor blood. Okay, this side here, okay, oxygen poor blood, oxygen rich blood, the blue side here. Okay, so the medium involved here is water. Okay, water for the respiratory medium, okay, source of oxygen to extract, or the medium to extract water, oxygen, okay. Water is the medium to extract oxygen. And then for mammals, okay, we have the many alveolus, okay. So these alveolus will provide large surface area, and they are all of these respiratory surface, they must be moist, okay. So as you can see for the alveolus, they are surrounded by many blood capillaries, okay. Okay, so respiratory surfaces for unicellular organism. So the entire cell surface for unicellular organism, for example, amoeba, act as respiratory organs. Okay, unicellular organism basically, for example, you have the unicellular eukaryotes. Okay, so they are one cell organism. So they depend on the cell membrane for respiratory organ. Okay. And then oxygen and carbon dioxide simply diffuses in and out of the cell surface without the requirement of a specific organs. But dia one cell organism je lah, mana ada organ lain dalam dia punya cell tu, faham? Okay, so they depend on the cell surface sahaja, cell membrane, to allow diffusion of gases, oxygen into the cell, carbon dioxide to be released. Okay, all of this occur through the process of diffusion. And then this can apply, this can only happen to unicellular organism due to their small size. Okay. So next, you have the worm, okay, earthworm for example. So they don't have lungs, okay, so the gas exchange occurs using the skin, okay, skin. So animal that use skin as a gas exchange organism are small size or flat. Okay, in this case is, for example, you have the earthworm, okay, in the diagram. So beneath the skin, okay, you have the many blood capillaries, so that oxygen can diffuse in, carbon dioxide diffuse out from the blood capillaries. Okay, so carbon dioxide diffuse out from the blood in the blood capillaries, passes the skin and into the atmosphere. Oxygen from the atmosphere, from the air, diffuse from the skin into the blood capillaries. So this one, it brings oxygen rich blood lah, kan, throughout the body. This one is, it brings out it brings oxygen poor blood, okay, so that carbon dioxide can be released. Okay, so this characteristics provides a high ratio of respiratory surface to body volume. So please highlight this point. Okay, so yang tadilah the respiratory surface must be large. Okay, so large surface area. So high ratio of respiratory surface to body volume. So allowing for sufficient gas exchange for the whole body. Okay, so as you can see, they have large surface area. So skin breathers also needs to live in damp, okay, water or moist places. Okay, so this is to make sure that the skin remains moist. Okay, so this is to facilitate the diffusion of gases across the skin to the dense net of thin wall capillaries lying just beneath the skin. So remember, another feature of respiratory surface, they must be moist. So this earthworm has to live in a moist earth, for example, kan. So tempat-tempat yang moist lah, yang lembap. Okay. So this is to allow gas exchange to occur. Okay. So the next one is for aquatic organism, in this case is you have, for example, fish. Okay, you have the marine worm. Okay, this one is marine worm. Okay, marine worm, they have functional gills. Yeah, outside ni macam bulu-bulu ni is actually the gills. Okay, and then crayfish, okay, they also have gills. And then for starfish, they also depends on gills. Okay, for respiratory surface. So kalau awak tengok kat sini, so this is the body surface. Okay, the greens, yang ni lah the body surface. Then you have in the gills, you have many gills lamella here. Okay, that is surrounded by many blood capillaries. Okay, many blood capillaries. So For aquatic organism, they have two types of gills. The first one is external gill and the second one is internal gills. Depend on the organism lah. So for fish, they have internal gills. Gills yang dalam dia punya insang ni, operculum tu. Okay, dalam dia punya belah ni lah kan. Insang kat dalam ni. So operculum dia. Okay. So yang for example earthworm, okay, they depends on external gills. Okay. Kalau starfish ni external gills, kalau crayfish ni is internal gills. Okay, internal. So nampak dia protected by the body structure here. Okay, so external gills, they have some disadvantage where they are more fragile. Okay, so they are exposed to the surrounding, they are more fragile. Okay. Okay, so as you can see here, yang ini is an axolot. Okay, axolot. Dia macam salamander tapi dia aquatic kat sini. So kalau kat sini awak tengok so they have external gills. For fish, they have internal gills. Okay. So moist, so the gills must be moist. You remember dia punya feature dia, they must be moist, thin surfaces that extend from the body surface. So the outer surface is exposed to water and inner side to networks of blood vessels. So outer surface is exposed to water. So water is the source of oxygen. Okay, respiratory kita panggil dia sebagai respiratory medium. Okay, respiratory medium ada dua, water and air. Okay, so for aquatic organism, they depend on water to extract out the oxygen. And inside the gills, you have many blood capillaries. Okay, so sea stars, okay, and also sea urchins have dermal gills that projects from the body wall. So gases are exchanged between water and the coelomic fluid. Okay, so various types of gills are found in some annelids. Okay, worms. Okay, aquatic mollusk. Jadi clams, for example clams. Okay, mollusk ni siput. Okay, and then crustacean tu macam ketam. Okay, crustacean, fishes and also amphibians. Okay, so gills can also be found in amphibians lah, anak-anak berudu tu kan, so amphibians. Ini ini saya rasa amphibians jugalah ni, axolot ni. Okay. Okay, so respiratory surfaces for gills. So thus gills have to be very efficient to meet the respiratory demands of the aquatic animals. Okay, so gills has great respiratory surface area compared to the remaining body surface. So kalau tengok kat sini kan, dia punya lamella ni is highly folded. It is highly folded. Okay, it is highly folded so that this is to make sure that the surface area is large. Okay. Okay, so you remember this great respiratory surface. Great ni ataupun boleh guna istilah lain, large lah, sama je. Okay, large respiratory surface area compared to the remaining body surface. And then second, the gills are full of tiny blood vessels. Okay, tiny blood vessels that allow close contact with oxygen dissolve in the surrounding water. Okay. So macam alveolus jugalah, so they must be surrounded with blood vessels. Okay, so that oxygen can diffuse into the from the gills into the blood vessels, so that the blood vessels carry oxygen rich blood throughout the body. Okay, and then returning from the body to the gills back, you have oxygen poor blood. Okay, tapi kalau fish ni, kita tengok hari tu masa circulatory system, they have single circuit kan. Kalau mammals, we have double circulatory system kan, tapi kalau for fish, they have single circuit. So it means that the heart pumps oxygen poor blood to the lungs kan, to the lungs, and then from the lungs throughout the body, and then back to the heart again. Macam tu. Okay. Okay, so for external gill first. Okay. So respiratory surface for external gills. So gills that are not enclosed within body structure. Ini contoh axolot lah. Sekarang ni semua orang duk berlumba nak bela kan exotic animals. So one of it is axolot. So make sure. Okay. So this is axolot lah. You have the external gills. So larvae of many fish and also amphibians have external gills. Okay. One example is axolot. This one here. Okay. The organism in the picture here is axolot. And then this disadvantage of having external gills is one, this animal has to constantly move, okay? Move to avoid oxygen depletion. So, untuk membolehkan oksigen daripada air, kan? So, to allow oxygen from water, the respiratory medium, to be extracted, okay? This is the water, surrounding water. Inside the water, you have oxygen. In order for the oxygen to be extracted from the water, the water must constantly move pass through the gills. Okay, the movement of water pass through the gills will ensure oxygen to be extracted from the water and enter into the blood capillaries within the lamella of the gills. But if there's no movement of water, oxygen cannot be extracted. Okay, so for this animal that have external gills, in order to make sure that the oxygen continuously supply from water into the gills, this animal has to constantly move, okay, to make sure that water flows, okay, in between the gills so that oxygen can be extracted. So they are easily damaged, okay, so they are not protected with like internal gills, okay, so they are easily damaged. So siapa yang bela axolot tu, make sure dia really take care of this animal lah. So because the external gill is really fragile, okay, they easily damaged. Okay, ni bukan macam bulu-bulu biasa. These are gills. Okay, so the animals depends on the gills to make sure that the oxygen is continuously supplied for this animal. Okay, for the axolot, for example. Okay, kalau internal gills saya ada bagi ke? Okay, okay, so respiratory surface for fish. Okay, so it says here the efficiency of fish gills is due to the simple adaptation. We call it as countercurrent exchange. Kita dah lagi sekali bertemu dengan istilah ni, countercurrent exchange. Itu first time kita jumpa istilah countercurrent ni masa bila? Masa formation of urine kan in the nephrons. Okay, countercurrent multiplier system tu kan. So make sure tengok balik, revise balik what is countercurrent multiplier system tu. And then another time we come across with countercurrent is during homeostasis lagi, which is thermoregulation kan. Thermoregulation, which is the arrangement of artery and veins that are side by side, but they allows blood to flow in opposite direction so that heat from the artery is transferred directly to the vein so that the heat will not get into body extremities and lost into the surrounding. So itu dalam thermoregulation kan. So satu dalam thermoregulation, satu lagi in the urine formation. Now is for respiratory surface in fish, in gills fish. Okay, it also involve countercurrent exchange. Hari tu saya mention countercurrent, it involve fluids. Okay, fluids, two sources of fluid that flows in the opposite direction, and it involves exchange of something. In this case, in the respiratory surface case of fish gills, dua fluid yang flows in the opposite direction. One is the blood in the blood vessels within the lamella, and the other one is the flow of water. Okay, so as you can see from this diagram, water will flows in the opposite direction, okay, as the blood in the blood capillaries. Okay, so yang blue here is oxygen poor blood kan. So oxygen poor blood will flow into from the vein into the blood capillaries of the gills, okay, which is within this lamella in opposite direction as water. So from oxygen poor blood to oxygen rich blood and into the arteries. Okay. So kalau tengok so water and blood they flow in the opposite direction and the exchange involved is respiratory gas. Okay, respiratory gases. Okay, so it means that oxygen, water will bring oxygen lah kan. So oxygen will enter into the blood vessels. Okay, so from the blood vessels, carbon dioxide will exit. Okay, will be released. Okay. So it says here for countercurrent exchange, oxygen is transferred from water, okay, from water that flows on the surface of the lamella. Ini lamella, lamella of gills, dia macam alveolus in the lungs, okay. On the surface of the lamella to the blood that is flowing in the opposite direction, okay, within the lamella. So blood and water they flows in the opposite direction. So it says here for the second point, as the low oxygenated blood, okay, enters the lamella, ni kan, oxygen poor blood enters the lamella through the blood vessels here. Okay, so it travels in the direction opposite to the water. So fish swim forward, air ke belakang. Faham? So they opposite to the water flow. Okay. So this encounters fresher water. So what does fresher water means? Water with more oxygen concentration. Okay, compared to the oxygen concentration in the blood. Okay, so it encounters fresher water with higher oxygen concentration. So therefore, when oxygen concentration in water is always higher compared to the oxygen concentration in the blood, so therefore oxygen will continuously flows or diffuse from water into the blood capillaries within the lamella. Okay, so therefore a steep diffusion gradient favors the transfer of oxygen from the water into the blood. So kalau awak tengok kat sini, dia enlarge kan, so to show what happened during gas exchange. So during gas exchange, so here you have water. Okay, so the blue arrow here indicates the flow of water that flows in the opposite direction as blood. Okay, so water, blood. So as blood flows, okay, passes through the lamella. So tengok concentration of water partial pressure ni, sorry, bukan water partial pressure, oxygen partial pressure within the water is always higher compared to the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood. So kalau tengok, kalau water ni is 150 for oxygen partial pressure, so dia akan counter oxygen partial pressure in the blood which is lower, okay, which is 140. So obviously diffusion will occur from water into the blood. So as the water move forward, okay, so the partial pressure of oxygen in the water is 120, they encounter dalam blood 110. So obviously higher lah kan. So oxygen from the water enters into the blood. From the water enters into the blood, from water enter into the blood. Faham? Okay. So that's why it says here, it ni is referring to the blood flow in the blood capillaries. Okay. The blood flows in the blood capillaries encounters water that carries oxygen concentration that is much higher compared to the oxygen concentration in the blood. Okay, so that is countercurrent exchange. So that's why for fish they depend on countercurrent exchange. What happen kalau awak fikir sendiri, what happen if kalau ini kan blood vessels, okay, so flow of blood is towards here, okay, so here you have oxygen poor blood, okay, this is oxygen rich blood lah kan. So daripada vein ke arteries lah, vein, blood capillaries in the lamella to the arteries. Okay, they nak make sure concentration of oxygen is high. So if okay, water, saya buat warna biru lah. If water were to flow in the same direction, okay, boleh tak berlaku efficient exchange of gas? Boleh tak berlaku? Okay, so dia tak boleh nak berlaku dengan drastik lah. Contohnya kita bagi contoh ya. Okay, oxygen poor blood kat sini dia buat 20 kan. So 20 concentration of oxygen in the blood. Bila dia encounter sepusi kat sini pressure kan. Pressure water. So pressure water obviously concentration dia is high for oxygen which is 150. Okay. So nampak ada steep gradient. 150 berbanding dengan 20 dalam darah. So maksudnya kat sini dah berlaku sangat mendadak diffusion of oxygen into the blood. Faham? So nanti bila dah kat tengah dia dah reach equilibrium dah. So separuh. So ini 150, let's say dah 75. Sini dalam blood pun dah 75. So sampai sini dah blood ni akan boleh extract sampai 75 je concentration of oxygen. Faham tak? So kalau kat sini dengan adanya boleh berlaku counter current exchange, it makes sure that the blood concentration of oxygen is high, which is bila dia keluar ke artery 140 berbanding kalau dia berlaku dalam aliran yang sama, darah dengan air dalam aliran yang sama, so dia tak boleh nak extract the maximum amount of oxygen sebab kat sini tengah halfway dia dah reach equilibrium. Faham? Okay? Which is kat sini dia boleh sampai 75 je instead of kalau counter current 140. So that's why for efficient exchange of gas in fish, they must involve counter current exchange. Okay? Okay, so far you have any question? Faham tak pasal counter current exchange ni? Faham Boleh?
Faham je.
Okay. So, kena faham lah kenapa memerlukan counter current exchange tu. Okay, so respiratory surfaces for terrestrial organism. Okay, terrestrials mean animals that lives on land. Okay, does not involve aquatic organism. So in terrestrial habitats, okay, gills are replaced. Okay, so for terrestrial animals, they cannot depend on gills. Sebab bila dah on land, obviously the gills, especially the external gills, will be dry. Kan, dia akan dry. So if dry, gas exchange cannot occur. Apa syarat dia kalau untuk respiratory gas must be moist. It must be moist. Okay. Itu salah satu disadvantage lah for terrestrial organism. They totally cannot depend on gills. So in terrestrial habitats, okay, gills are replaced because number one, air is less buoyant than water. Maksudnya udara cannot support. Okay, cannot support the structure of gills. Only water can. Okay, so that's why air is less buoyant. Okay, so gills need structural support of water. So because air is less buoyant than water, so gills will collapse outside of the water. Okay, so the air cannot support the structure of gills, so that it causes the gills to be collapsed and prevent exchange of gas from occurring. So number two, water diffuses into the air through evaporation because tadi kita tengok kan, ada banyak lamella kan, so the lamella is surrounded by many blood capillaries. If they are exposed to the air, so obviously evaporation will occur. Okay, so water diffuses into the air through evaporation, so gills provide an enormous surface area for water loss through evaporation. So this one is really not efficient. Okay, so gills is really not efficient for terrestrial organism. Okay, so for terrestrial organism, so orang ingat dua faktor ni, why gills is not suitable. Okay, it's not suitable for terrestrial organism. Okay, so for terrestrial organism, so there are three main types of respiratory organs used by the terrestrial animals. You have the tracheal system for insects, skin, for example, earthworm, amphibians, lungs are for mammals and also birds. Okay, and also reptiles. Okay. Okay, so respiratory surfaces for insects. Okay, so insects have an extensive system of external chitin. Okay, external chitin, reinforced tubes named trachea. Okay, so which branches throughout the body. Kalau kita sampai trachea je lah kan, dapat from your nose into your nasal cavity, into your trachea, into your lungs. So the trachea is for human, for example, they are made up of cartilage. Okay, but for for insects, they are made up of chitin. Okay, chitin. Okay, so these are made up of chitin. So air tubes, okay, which is trachea, air tubes. Okay, so from trachea branches throughout the body. So insects and some other arthropods, okay, such as a grasshopper, so have a network of tracheal tubes, okay, or trachea that deliver air directly into cells. Okay, so branch ni akan extend into individual cells within the insects. Okay, so this system eliminates the needs of having a closed circulatory system for transporting oxygen as in higher animals. So kita tengok dah pun hari tu kan, kalau for insects they have open circulatory system. Okay, for respiration they depends on tracheal system. Okay, trachea. So kat sini you have the spiracle. Yes, spiracle. Okay, spiracle where oxygen enter into the air tube, into the trachea. Okay, into the branch tracheal tubes and into individual tracheal that end to each cells in the body. Okay. So kat sini kan akan ada fluid lah. Fluid to make sure, okay, it is moist here to make sure that exchange of gas can occur. So syarat dia tadi apa? Kena moist kan. So the system relies on a network of small tubes, okay, that channel oxygen directly to different parts of the body. So air enters the tracheal tubes through the spiracle. Okay, spiracle tu holes, lubang-lubang halus lah untuk oksigen masuk. Okay, oksigen masuk, carbon dioxide keluar lah. So the tracheal tube branch into smaller and smaller tubes called tracheoles. Okay, so the tips of the tracheoles are enclosed and contain fluid. Kenapa contain fluid? Sebab syarat untuk respiratory surface, they must be moist. Okay, must be moist. So where gas exchange between this fluid and the body cell occurs. Okay, so piping air directly from external environment to the cell works very well for insects because their small body give them a high surface area to volume ratio. Okay, so insects also prevent excessive water loss by closing the spiracle, which we call it as the breathing pores as well. Okay, so in order to prevent water loss, they will close the spiracles. Okay. Inilah spiracle tu tadi ni. Okay. Lubang-lubang kat tepi badan dia ni. Okay, so you have many spiracles. Bukan you tapi insects. Okay, so next is you have the lungs. Okay, so many terrestrial vertebrates have lungs which are internal sac lined with moist epithelium. Okay, moist epithelium is referring to the wall of the alveolar wall. Okay. So the alveolar wall, they are one-celtic, they are moist. Okay. So in contrast to the trachea system of insects, lungs are restricted in one location in the body. For insect tadi, it extends throughout the body. Okay, it extends throughout the body because each tracheoles will terminate or will end or will supply to each body cells. Okay, but for the lungs, okay, they are inside, especially inside the thoracic cavity. Okay, dia dekat thoracic cavity saja, dia tak sampai ke kaki kan. It is located in the thoracic cavity. So therefore there is a need for circulatory system. So that's why for animals that depends on the lungs, they need double circulation, they need a closed circulatory system. Okay, so here the alveolus, the alveolar wall, as you can see, it is one cell thick and it is surrounded by many blood capillaries. So the blue, okay, the blue blood vessels here is from the vein that carries from the veins, pulmonary veins. Pulmonary artery. Sorry, pulmonary artery. Okay, this one is from pulmonary artery. Ingat pulmonary artery, it carries oxygen poor blood to the lungs, into the systemic circuit. Okay, so from oxygen poor blood, gas exchange occurs, oxygen will be exhaled out. Okay, when you inhale, it brings in oxygen into the air spaces within the alveolus. So oxygen from the air spaces within the alveolus will enter into the will enter into the blood, and the blood will become oxygen-rich blood and back into the atrium here. We call it, yang ni adalah left atrium. Okay, so ini adalah pulmonary vein. Okay, pulmonary vein, it carries oxygen-rich blood to the heart, to the left atrium. Ni pulmonary artery. Okay, it carries oxygen poor blood. Okay, so from the artery into the left ventricle, from the pulmonary vein into the atrium. Okay, into the atrium, into the left left ventricles. Okay, out into the aorta, into the systemic circuit. Okay, so systemic circuit will supply oxygen-rich blood. So oxygen-rich blood will enter blood capillaries in body tissues where gas exchange occurs. Kat sini akan ada apa? Interstitial fluid. So oxygen daripada oxygen-rich blood enters into the blood capillaries, diffuse out into interstitial fluid, into your blood, into your body cells. Okay, so body cell requires oxygen for cellular respiration, and the cell uses oxygen to carry out cellular respiration, and the byproduct is carbon dioxide. Okay, the waste. So oxygen, carbon dioxide diffused from the body cell into blood, into interstitial fluid, into blood capillaries, into the veins. Okay, veins carry oxygen poor blood. This one is the vein that yang kasi kita namakan sebagai kalau kat sini daripada bawah inferior vena cava kan, daripada upper part of your body is inferior vena cava. So it brings oxygen poor blood to the to the right atrium. Okay, right atrium into right ventricle, out to the pulmonary artery, into the lung balik semula. Ini kita combine sekali lah respiratory surface and circulatory system. Okay, so respiratory system and also circulatory system. Okay, they are related to one another. Okay, so for frogs, okay, so frogs, kita tengok frogs sekejap. Okay, so frogs by the cutaneous respiration. You ada kelas ke lepas ni? S9, S10?
Ada, madam.
Okay, so kita stop lah dulu sampai frog ni. Okay, we stop here sampai frog. Nanti kita sambung lecture on Khamis. Kan, so Khamis saya nak habiskan respiratory system ni. So hari Jumaat kita boleh discuss tutorial. Okay?
Khamis esok lah madam.
Apa? Esok lah.
Baik madam, insyaAllah.
Okay.